Hi there, welcome to Lush Living. Today's topic is, so what's the problem with sit-ups? I'm Katie Lush, and as I was writing it and submitting it, I decided to go down the rabbit hole of all the articles I could find about sort of debunking sit-ups. So I think it was back in 2016. So back in 2016, the Army actually eliminated doing sit-ups for part of their strength training. I think it was probably part of their fitness test that they used to do. And there was some crazy number, and I have a bunch of notes here, but 50% of soldiers' injuries were due to sit-ups. How crazy is that? And the fact that they were even able to track it is kind of even more unbelievable. But, so that study was back in 2015. So you can dig around online and find it. I'll try to link to it here. But, so it's a busy time of year in gyms and studios. Why? Because, fitness resolutions tend to be top of the list for a lot of people, kicking off New Year's resolutions. And so, we're already in February, and my joke, it's not really a joke, but most people pretty much give up their New Year's resolution by Valentine's Day. So we're in February. I'm kind of curious how many people have kept up with their new fitness regime. But, millions of Americans throw themselves into these really high intensity workout classes and trying to get fit and healthy. And a lot of times they've done months of inactivity. So they haven't done anything for a really long time. And next thing you know, they're throwing themselves into the gym, and probably right around this time, 4 weeks later, they're starting to suffer. So if there was one exercise, I could put a big billboard up in every gym as a health warning, it would probably be for sit-ups. And this is why. So it kind of comes as a shock, I think, to most people when I say that sit-ups are probably one of the worst things for your back. Might be an overstatement, but they are a bit of a spinal accident sort of waiting to happen. And what's crazy is that the sit-up used to be the gold standard of fitness. Most people, when they think of trying to strengthen their core, they immediately think, I need to do some sit-ups. So what's the problem with sit-ups? So here's the Cliff Notes version. I've got my notes here, so I apologize if I'm not looking directly at you, but sit-ups, and I'm talking full sit-ups, when you lie down on the floor and you come all the way up to your knees and you come all the way back down. So it really activates the rectus abdominis, your six-pack, and a lot of the superficial core muscles. So when these muscles get too strong, and really it's not even strong, they get too tight. And I'm assuming that when people do sit-ups or crunches, they're doing high repetition, high volume of these things because they think if you do more, you'll get better results. So if you go to do lots of sit-ups in your routine, not only are you creating an abnormally, no pun intended, an abnormally tight rectus abdominis, a lot of people will get a distended abdomen as a result. And that's the opposite. Everybody does sit-ups because they want a flat six-pack ab structure, when a lot of people, when they do sit-ups, they bulge, and then therefore they actually are creating the opposite. They're creating a Valsalva maneuver, which is a bearing down experience, and their abdominal wall pushes forward. So there was this other study, which I find fascinating. It was by a biomechanist, the University of Waterloo, Stuart McGill, and he studied pig cadavers, random, and he flexed their spines in a similar way that you would do a sit-up, and he did it for hours at a time. So a little excessive. Most of us are not doing sit-ups for hours, but some people take core classes for a good 30 minutes. I know I used to at my favorite gym, so that's a big chunk of your day. And what he found were the discs in your spine, the cartilage, so think of the grape, the jelly that sits between the vertebrae, were squeezed to the point where they bulged. So it actually created slip discs. And if you have a slip disc or know anybody who's had a slip disc, it's incredibly painful, pushes a lot on the spine, causes a lot of back pain. So I'm going to take this study with a grain of salt. These pigs were cadavers. They were not alive pigs. I don't know how you could get a pig to do sit-ups for hours on end. So there's something to be said about doing a study on an alive thing versus a dead thing. But I do think like putting somebody in a repetitive motion positioning, and again at the volume that a lot of people do for sit-ups, could cause some low back issues. And this guy kind of proved it. I'm not going to 100% say that my clients experience slip discs from doing roll-ups, but I think if you do them excessively, anything to excess, and you don't sort of cross-train your abdominal choices, I think you could actually experience some low back issues. So the aim is that people really want six-pack abs, right? They really want like a flat abdominal wall aesthetically. I mean, I know that that was something that I was really after. So one of the best things you can actually do is to hang. And I've got my Cadillac back here. So believe it or not, ooh, look at that sunshine. Believe it or not, hanging exercises are some of the best for creating abdominal strength with length, and what I'm going to refer to it as, what we really are wanting is a reflexive core. The six-pack is maybe pretty according to some people's standards, but really what that's showing is an overly tight abdominal wall. So if you checked out my video that I did a while back about why fitness pros, why Pilates instructors are more at risk for cesarean births, this is why. When we go for that aesthetic of that six-pack, we unfortunately are setting ourselves up for a dysfunctional abdominal wall and therefore a dysfunctional core, and could potentially set ourselves up for pelvic floor injury, low back issues, and something else called diastasis, which is an abnormal separation of your abdominal wall. Because if you think of the container of your torso, the pressure inside the container needs to be sort of at this appropriate level. And when you breathe, the pressures of the container change. They increase when you inhale and they decrease when you exhale, which means the container needs to spread and expand accordingly. But if your abdominal wall in the very front is really rigid and tight, it won't let the container expand like it needs to. And then unfortunately, something else is gonna give. So if this is not gonna give, maybe the center of it gives, or maybe something in the back has to give, or maybe something off to the side has to give. So I just think of us as like a pressure cooker. And so we need to have that suppleness all the way around the container, and just to have that front six-pack pretty rectus abdominis is quite unfunctional. So if you want a flat abdominal wall, you need a reflexive core. And I'm even gonna back that up. When I talk about a flat abdominal wall, I'm gonna say that might be what you want. That's something that you potentially, as a student, as a person, as a human in our culture, it seems to be something that people really aspire to. Personally, I have let that go. I personally want a reflexive core. I want my pressure system to be supple and strong in every direction. And I've given up I don't need a six-pack abdominal wall. But if that's something you are seeking and it's very important to you, the first thing you should actually do is practice hanging. So the next thing that most people talk about, especially in the article when it comes to the US Army, is they replace the sit-ups with planks. And planks now seem to be like the gold standard for abdominal health and strength. And a lot of the websites that I went through talked about how planks were teaching the abdominal wall how to stop, because apparently that is more advantageous. So if you were in combat and somebody's coming at you, you actually need the abdominal wall to brace and stop you to be able to push back against something. And I see that, like I understand that. But when are you doing a plank in your daily life? When are you doing a plank? You're almost never doing a plank in your daily life. Now, the Army also added things like some pushing and pulling sequences, and I'm like, okay, now we're on to something. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But when people talk about a plank being functional movement, I get really triggered, because when are we ever in a plank anywhere in our day? I mean, and I'm digging deep here. Like, if I were out in nature, why would I need to be in a plank? What would cause me to need to go into a plank position? And I honestly can't come up with anything. I don't know if you can, let me know. But to me, a plank is not functional. It really isn't. It might strengthen a lot of stuff, which is great, and I see nothing wrong with that. And I think it's a good isometric choice. It's an upper body workout. Your legs are incorporated, so is your torso. You know, it's like a full body exercise. I think it's fine. Push-ups are great. I see nothing wrong with a plank. But when people talk about a plank being a functional exercise, I take issue with that, because I personally think that functional movements are walking, squatting, hanging, crawling, things of that nature, even jumping, things that you like need to do if you're out in nature, kind of moving through life, things that our ancestors used to do. So hanging, I just mentioned, that would make sense. That to me is a functional movement, and it also helps to create a reflexive core, because as soon as you hang from your arms, your stomach is keeping your lower half of your body attached to your upper half of your body, and it's recruiting. And it's in a very stretched position, so there's even more load, I think, on the tissues than what we're accustomed to, because our legs are pretty heavy, especially if you have long legs. So if you have really long legs, then your stomach is working even harder to keep your contents together. You will not rip in half. But I have this posted as a video, so if you want to, I'm gonna create a link to it. I have what I call my ab lab, which are like my I think it's 2 major exercises that I teach in my Reboot program, but I'll create a link to that so you can see what my favorite little, I think it's like 5 minutes. It's really short, 3 to 5 minutes of my favorite abdominal exercises, but I'm gonna show you one that's actually not in that for my favorite abdominal exercises to create a functional core, assuming that's what we want. So I'm gonna come onto the Cadillac. So I talked about our pressure system, and to keep it mobile and supple starts with our breath, believe it or not. So to get the best activation of our core, we actually have to have good breathing patterns. So if you practice fogging glass, or if you wear glasses and you go to clean them and you go fogging them, you're making like an H-A-ha sound. And if you put your hand, remember people used to do this to check their breath and then smell it. So if you can create heat in your palm and do a really prolonged exhale, you'll feel your core kick on at the very tail end of your breath. So practice that. Take a deep breath in, and then H-A-ha, and feel that internal support. So keeping that in mind, I'm gonna come into a cat position. So you're on your hands and your knees, and you're gonna let your belly go. It's like everything we tell you not to do. I'm doing that to actually encourage a neutral spine. But a lot of us are holding our tummies in all day long because we think it makes us look better, but it's actually creating a little bit of dysfunction in our torso because you're tensing and holding a shape all day long, and then therefore it's not reflexive. It's like holding your belly in a cast. So let your belly go. Again, it's everything we tell you not to do. Probably feels really uncomfortable. Might not be very aesthetically pleasing, but don't worry about it, no judgment. So letting your belly hang, letting your lumbar curve. Keep pushing actively through your arms, and then you're gonna do that same HA-ha breathing. Inhale, exhale. And at the very tail end, you're gonna really feel your abdominal wall recruit. Same thing, inhale, exhale. And again, you're gonna really feel that deep abdominal contraction. One more time, inhale, exhale. And you feel all that tone, and now your abdominal wall is sort of set up for success. So when you go to layer on some movement, that is your base and your foundation. You wanna do that nice HA-ha breathing, and you can feel how the fibers of the abdominal wall just naturally come together. Your bones stay exactly the same. It's really the muscular tissues just come together organically. And that's all the abdominal tension that you need. That's all the tone that you need. And then all you do is then layer on stuff. So if you go to visit my ab lab, which I will link to, you'll see the exercise sequence that I layer in. But start with this HA-ha breathing so that you, again, create that reflexive core. You're really organizing the abdominal wall well. You're very supported in your torso. And then it gives you actually better results when it comes to working your core, because you're building it now into other movements. So if you weight lift and you do like lunges or squats or deadlifts or anything, bicep curls, if you can think of doing like a little HA-ha, feel a little bit of core support, then go to do whatever it is you're doing, it's just gonna set you up better overall. And as a little aside, if you can breathe a little bit out and try to do the motion closer to the tail end of the breath, so you might need to learn how to do this ha a little bit quicker, that's okay. But you wanna really layer on some movement towards the tail end of the exhale, not the very beginning of the exhale, because as you notice, as you exhale, the fibers get closer and closer together towards the tail end of the breath. So that gives you really good core support. If you start the motion at the very top of the breath, the fibers are not sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not optimized because they're too sort of separated. That's not the right phrase, but as you breathe out, the fibers start to contract and come together, and then you're gonna get even more core support. And I think that's sort of what we're all looking for. So hopefully that helps. So why sit-ups are no longer the gold standard of fitness. Interesting. But I will link to that ab lab because I do think it's actually a really good workout. It's short, it's effective, it gets to the upper fiber of the abdominals, the lower fiber of the abdominals, and I think it's really getting to what we want ultimately, which is a strong reflexive core. All right, that's it. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you next week. All right, take care. Bye.